What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors goes head-to-head with a morning show host trying to play tough? You're about to see one of the most tense moments ever captured on live television, and believe me, it escalates fast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, because Tom Hardy's reaction here is truly something else. There's Tom Hardy, sitting across from George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America, and the tension is already thick. Hardy's there to promote his new movie, but Stephanopoulos clearly has a different agenda. Hardy, dressed in his usual simple black jacket, gives off an energy that says he's not in the mood for games today. "Tom, thanks for being here this morning," Stephanopoulos begins, wearing his usual polished TV smile. "Your new film's getting amazing reviews, but I'd like to start with something different." Hardy shifts slightly, his jaw tightening just a little. "All right, George," he says. "What's on your mind?" George goes in. "There's been a lot of talk about your comments on method acting and mental health," he continues. "Some critics believe you've been careless with how you approach your craft." Instantly, Hardy's face changes, his eyes sharpen, and it's clear he didn't expect this direction. This wasn't meant to be an ambush. "Irresponsible?" Hardy responds. His voice is steady, but there's a sharpness that fans of his work would instantly recognize. "That's an interesting choice of words, George. Want to explain what you mean?" George leans in, confident he's steering the moment. "Mental health advocates have taken issue with your recent interviews. You've talked about diving into dark psychological spaces for roles, and they say you're glorifying risky behavior." Hardy, his Birmingham accent becoming more distinct, asks, "And do you agree with that?" "I'm the one asking questions here," George replies. "What would you say to parents who might be worried young actors are following your example?" There's a pause. Hardy stares at him. The silence stretches out on live television. The audience goes completely quiet, knowing something's about to go sideways. Finally, Hardy answers. "Parents should be worried about hosts who don't bother to research before springing loaded questions on their guests, based on gossip." George's smile fades slightly. "Tom, that's not fair. We're just trying to have an honest conversation." Hardy chuckles, but there's no warmth behind it. "An honest conversation? George, if that were true, you'd have warned my publicist about this line of questioning. You would have looked into the topic instead of reading from a teleprompter. But that's clearly not what's happening here. I think our viewers deserve to hear your answer to these serious concerns." Hardy stays calm, but it's obvious he's growing frustrated. "Your viewers deserve more than tabloid-style ambushes pretending to be journalism," he says. "Tell me, George, when's the last time you actually studied method acting? Have you spoken to any real mental health professionals about how exploring complex emotions can be therapeutic in a professional environment?" George is starting to look rattled but tries to hold his ground. "Tom, I think you're being a little defensive." Hardy repeats the word back. "Defensive?" Now there's genuine disbelief in his tone. "George, I got here at 5 in the morning to talk about a film I care deeply about. Instead, you're trying to corner me with quotes pulled out of context. That's not defensiveness. That's me expecting a basic level of professionalism." "Well, the quotes speak for themselves." Hardy leans forward. "Do they? Then tell me, which quotes, exactly? Can you give me the exact words, George?" There's an awkward pause. George glances at his notes, then back at Hardy. "Well, you've given several interviews discussing your preparation methods." "Several interviews?" Hardy repeats slowly. "But you can't name one. You can't tell me which outlet, which journalist, or which specific words you found troubling." "Tom, I think we're going off topic here." Hardy pushes back. "No, George. We're finally getting on topic. You've accused me of being careless, of having a negative influence on young actors. But you can't even point to what I supposedly said. That's not journalism. That's character attack based on rumors." The camera catches George looking increasingly uneasy, struggling to keep his calm. I've got notes here with the information. Then read them, Hardy says flatly. Read the exact words that supposedly prove I'm a bad influence. George fumbles through his papers. You can actually see the sweat starting to appear. The specific quote isn't as important as the pattern of behavior. Hardy raises his voice slightly for the first time. The specific quote isn't important? George, you just spent 5 minutes questioning my integrity based on something I allegedly said, and now you're saying the words don't even matter? That's not what I'm saying, George replies quickly. Hardy doesn't let it slide. Then what are you saying, George? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you invited me here under false pretenses just to hit me with accusations you can't even explain clearly. The atmosphere in the studio is getting heavier. You can spot staff members in the background exchanging concerned glances, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. Trying to shift the tone, Stephanopoulos clears his throat. Tom, let's talk about your new movie. The character deals with some pretty serious emotional issues. But Hardy isn't ready to let it go. No, George. We're not moving on. You spent the last several minutes criticizing how I approach my craft, using arguments you didn't bother to research. You owe your audience better than this. You owe me better than this. George tries again. I think we should change the subject. But Hardy presses on. No. You mentioned mental health advocates are concerned about my influence. So go ahead, name one. Just one person who's publicly said that. George shifts uncomfortably. There have been articles. Hardy cuts in. Articles. But no names. No direct quotes. No real examples. Just vague references you're using to prop up your argument. Hardy leans forward slightly, and the change in his tone makes the moment even more intense. You do realize you're doing exactly what you're accusing me of? You're shaping a harmful narrative based on assumptions. You're repeating unverified claims as though they're facts. That's not responsible reporting, George. George tries to draw a line. That's not the same thing. But Hardy isn't buying it. Isn't it? You've just told millions of viewers that I might be a bad influence on young actors, that mental health advocates think I'm irresponsible, but you can't back that up with a single piece of real evidence. The camera zooms in as Stephanopoulos' professional mask begins to slip. He looks uncomfortable, almost cornered. Our producers looked into these topics, he says, hoping that explanation is enough. Your producers, Hardy echoes, this time with a faint note of pity in his voice. Right. Tell me something, George. How long have you been in journalism? That's not relevant, Stephanopoulos snaps. But Hardy calmly disagrees. No, I think it is. Because what you're doing right now. This isn't journalism. This is gossip. This is careless and lazy, and it's exactly the kind of thing that damages the reputation of actual journalists who do real work. George's face is growing redder. Tom, I don't appreciate your tone. Hardy's response is sharp but level. And I don't appreciate being ambushed on national television by someone who couldn't be bothered to check their facts. But here we are. He continues. You brought me here under the impression we'd talk about my movie. Instead, the moment the camera started rolling, you switched gears to a baseless attack, based on things you admit you can't even quote. The studio audience remains completely silent, fully locked into the confrontation unfolding. Even the crew seems frozen, unsure whether to intervene or keep filming. George tries again to calm things down. Tom, I think you're overreacting. Hardy lowers his voice, which only makes his response feel more cutting. Overreacting? George, you've just accused me, live, on air, of being a harmful influence. You've suggested I'm irresponsible about mental health. You've painted me as a threat to young actors. And now, because I'm asking you to show proof, you want to call that an overreaction? These are valid questions about how public figures speak on sensitive issues. George insists. But Hardy isn't letting him take cover behind broad claims. Valid based on what? Show me a study. Show me an expert's opinion. Show me something besides a producer's summary of someone else's opinion about a quote you can't even repeat. Stephanopoulos drops his gaze to his notes, clearly searching for a way out. The concerns have been raised in different media outlets. He mumbles. Hardy raises his eyebrows. Media outlets. George, listen to yourself. You're sounding like a politician dodging a question. Some sources say. Concerns have been raised. These are weasel words. He doesn't stop there. This is how people speak when they don't actually have the facts. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying you're making claims you can't back up, and instead of admitting that, you're hiding behind vague statements. I'm not hiding anything, George says defensively. Then show me the source. Hardy challenges. Right now. One example. One quote. One actual name. Something, anything, to support the things you've been implying about me this entire interview. The pause that follows feels like it lasts forever in broadcast time. George flips through his notes again, looking at the cameras, then back at Hardy. Tom, I think we're focusing too much on this. Hardy doesn't blink. No. We're focusing on it just enough. You made strong accusations about my character and my work. Now that I'm asking you to explain them, you want to change the subject. That's not how this works, George. Nobody's trying to run away. Stephanopoulos says weakly. Then stop dodging. Give me one name. One quote. One piece of solid evidence. Otherwise, admit you've got nothing. George is now visibly sweating. Tom, our research team collected this information from many sources. Hardy repeats the words slowly. Your research team collected information. George, that's not an answer. That's corporate filler. That's the kind of excuse people use when they know they've been caught unprepared. You're being aggressive. George mutters. But Hardy shakes his head. I'm being accurate. There's a difference. You came at me with accusations. Now you're frustrated because I'm asking for accountability. That's not aggression. That's professionalism. The camera sweeps across the studio, catching the audience sitting still, caught somewhere between fascination and discomfort, the kind of silence that tells you something serious is unfolding. George takes a breath, trying one more time to bring things back to normal. Tom, let's talk about your new film. I think our viewers would prefer that. Hardy doesn't move. Your viewers deserve better than this, he says firmly. They deserve a host who comes prepared, who asks informed questions, not someone who relies on rumors disguised as facts. They deserve a real conversation, not tabloid tricks. You're being very aggressive. Stephanopoulos fires back. But Hardy remains calm. No, George, I'm being specific. You threw serious accusations at me. Now that I'm asking you to back them up, you're calling it aggression. That's not fair. That's called being held accountable. The audience is fully locked in, watching a situation spiral out of the usual polished morning show script. George tries again. Let's try to get back on track and have a productive conversation. But Hardy doesn't let the pivot slide. We could have had one, if you had opened with real questions about my work. But instead you chose this path. So let's walk it. One last attempt comes from Stephanopoulos. Tom, I know you care deeply about your craft, and I respect that. But surely, you'd agree that celebrities should take responsibility when discussing delicate issues in public. Hardy's stare sharpens. When he speaks, his tone cuts like a knife through the air. Absolutely, George. Celebrities do have a responsibility, just as journalists have a responsibility to be informed. Just as morning hosts have a duty to prepare properly. Just as national media outlets must hold themselves to a standard of basic integrity. George nods slightly. I believe we hold high standards here. Hardy doesn't let that slide either. Do you? Because what your audience is watching right now is a man who made serious claims without doing his homework, asked loaded questions without supporting evidence, and is now avoiding responsibility when asked to explain himself. Is that what you call a high standard? The camera lingers on Stephanopoulos' face, which is now clearly showing the pressure. Tom, you're being incredibly difficult, he says. Hardy responds with disbelief. Difficult? George, you blindsided me with false claims on live TV, and now I'm difficult because I asked for proof? What exactly did you expect would happen? He adds. George mutters. I expected a professional conversation. Then you should have behaved like a professional. Hardy snaps back. You should have come prepared. You should have asked actual questions, not tried to trap me with half-truths and rumors. Stephanopoulos glances around the studio, likely hoping someone will intervene, maybe cut to commercial. Tom, I think we need to wrap this up. But Hardy isn't backing down. Now you want to wrap it up? After you spent nearly 10 minutes attacking my integrity without evidence? After you told millions of viewers that I might be harmful to young actors, based on nothing you can quote or cite, now it's time to move on. We have limited time. George replies weakly. Yes, and you chose to waste it chasing made-up drama instead of focusing on my work. You made that call, George. Not me. The room feels frozen. All you can hear is the faint sound of the cameras running. Everyone on set seems unsure of what to do next. This whole thing has gone off the rails, George says, voice strained. Tom, I'm going to ask you one more time to tone it down. Hardy lowers his voice again, making it all the more chilling. Tone it down? You want me to tone it down, after you used your platform to accuse me of harming people? After you undermined my career in front of a national audience with no actual proof? I'm just trying to have a civil conversation, George insists. Hardy lets out a laugh, but it's dry, hollow, and clearly fed up. Civil? There's nothing civil about blindsiding a guest with false claims. There's nothing civil about repeating baseless accusations. There's nothing civil about trying to damage someone's reputation for a few viral clips. George is visibly sweating now, no longer able to hide behind his usual calm demeanor. Tom, that's not what this is about. Then tell us what it is about. Hardy challenges. Tell your audience why you invited me here under a false premise. Explain why you thought it was okay to throw around damaging claims without evidence. Explain why you think journalism means repeating gossip and calling it news. George tries to shift again. We're trying to ask important questions about celebrity influence. But Hardy shuts that door. No, George. You're trying to stir up controversy that doesn't exist. You're trying to create drama for ratings. And when you get called out on it, you hide behind phrases like important questions and public responsibility. But let's be honest, this isn't about concern. It's about clicks. The camera turns to Stephanopoulos, and for the first time, he looks completely worn down, defeated even. But Hardy still isn't finished. Let me ask you something, George. Do you have kids? That's not relevant. George replies, clearly nervous. I think it is, Hardy says, unrelenting. Do you have children who might see this interview one day? Who'll watch how you act professionally? What do you think they'll learn from this? That it's okay to make claims without proof? That it's fine to blindside someone for ratings? That when caught unprepared, you can just tell your guest to calm down and move on. George's eyes dart off camera, clearly hoping someone will step in and put an end to the conversation. George glances off camera again, silently pleading with his producers. Tom, I think we should take a break. Hardy shifts forward slightly in his chair. A break? He echoes. George, you don't get to walk away from accountability. You don't get to make serious claims about someone's character and then tap out when you're asked to explain them. Then it happens. Security? George calls out. That one word changes everything. Hardy's face registers disbelief. Security? He repeats, stunned. You're calling security on me? For asking you to explain your own questions? For asking you to back up your claims with facts? This is unreal. You can see security beginning to move toward the set. Hardy stays calm, shaking his head. So this is what journalism looks like now. A guest pushes back, asks for evidence, and the response is to send in security? He then turns and looks directly into the camera. This is the media today, folks. If you call out sloppy reporting or ask for proof, they don't clarify, they call security. One of the guards approaches. Tom, you need to calm down. Hardy doesn't flinch. Calm down? I'm sitting here, speaking clearly, asking basic questions. What exactly am I supposed to calm down from? Stephanopoulos has now lost full control of the situation. Remove him from the set, he says, eyes darting to the crew. Hardy remains seated, composed, firm. On what grounds? For what exactly? For expecting a host to be prepared? For challenging unsupported claims? That's what you're removing me for. As security steps in closer, Hardy rises slowly, deliberately, never raising his voice. This is truly something else. I came here to talk about my work, about a film I poured myself into. And now, I'm being escorted out, not for being rude, not for shouting, but for expecting the most basic level of professional integrity. He turns to the camera one last time, his voice steady and clear. Remember this moment. This is what happens when someone asks for accountability in today's media landscape. Then, without being touched, Tom Hardy walks off the set on his own, leaving George Stephanopoulos sitting there frozen, stunned, his notes scattered and unread. The studio audience sits in complete silence, not even whispering. The camera lingers on George for a moment longer, capturing him fumbling through his papers, trying to gather himself, visibly shaken. With nothing left to say, the screen finally fades out, cutting to what was clearly an unplanned commercial break. And just like that, what was meant to be a simple interview turned into one of the most uncomfortable and revealing moments in live television history. Hardy didn't just defend himself, he peeled back the curtain on the empty sensationalism that often drives modern morning shows. What did you think of that jaw-dropping exchange? Drop a comment below and tell us which part of Hardy's response hit the hardest. And if you want more celebrity moments where people refuse to play along with the media machine, don't forget